Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, they saw 2 men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep. But since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen, listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things they had seen. On the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. Just then, a man from the crowd shouted, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He is my only child." Suddenly, a spirit seizes him, and all at once he shrieks. It convulses him until he foams at the mouth. It mauls him and scarcely will leave him. I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. Jesus answered, "You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon dashed him to the ground in convulsions. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And all were astounded at the greatness of God. The word of the Lord. In October, I was afforded the awesome experience of being able to travel to Voi, Kenya, with 5 other members of our congregation to visit our friends at St. Stephen's Presbyterian Church of East Africa. One of the difficulties about going on a trip like this is describing it once you get back. I mean, almost everyone that I tell that I have been to Kenya, they automatically assume that I went there on a mission trip. And they want to know what I did while I was there. And by did, they mean what did I dig, build, construct, oversee, teach. And when I say, no, it wasn't like that, I went to Voi to, therein lies the problem. I'm not sure even I know exactly what we went over there to do. Now, of course, we did take lots of school supplies for the children that attend St. Stephen's Academy. And we did check on the building of the guest house. And we even bought some much needed computer equipment for the elementary school. But all of that was such a minuscule part of what we did while we were there. And so as I reflect back and I ask myself, what did we do? I come up with, well, most of the time we sat in a very crowded, very hot, sometimes kind of smelly van. A van that was overcrowded with a mixture of Kenyans and Americans, sometimes just on our way to see the sights of whatever city we were in, sometimes to go to someone's house and share a meal with them, sometimes to go to the school and watch them do a performance, do a play, or sing for us. And sometimes, most of the time, we were just sitting in traffic. Because if I can tell you anything about Kenya, it's that it doesn't matter where you are or how close it is to the next distance that you're going to. It's going to take a long time to get there. And speaking of it being a long time, you may be thinking to yourself, it sure has taken Katy a long time to talk about her experience in Kenya and what it meant to her. After all, we've been back almost 4 months, and I believe this is the first time I've mentioned it in a sermon. And to tell you the truth, I'm a little bit ashamed about that, because I feel like I should be telling you all the time how that trip changed me. I feel like I should tell you how it made me notice things that I didn't notice before. And it made me listen for things that I wasn't listening for before. It made me experience things in new ways. It changed me. And it's hard for me to talk about because it's complicated. I mean, I'm not sure I even know all of the ways that that trip has changed the way I experienced my everyday life. But I don't think I'm alone. I think that people in general, and Christians in particular, have a hard time communicating with each other about our experiences of faith. I mean, the author of Luke waited almost 40 years after Jesus' death and resurrection to write to his community and to tell them all of the experiences that they had and how it changed him and all of the followers of Christ. And it's a complicated story. It's not an easy one to tell. I mean, even if you just look at what we read this morning, it's filled with metaphors and visions of people who may or may not have died and are now living and talking with Jesus up on a mountain. Or are they really? Is it just a vision, or was it a dream? I mean, after all, Luke tells us they were weighed down with sleep. And I'm not even sure that Luke knows exactly what was experienced, because even he talks about it being cloudy and a little bit frightening. I mean, voices are coming from clouds, and then people or ghosts or visions or dreams or whatever they were disappear. But this author is still trying to tell us. He's still trying to convey that experience so that it has meaning for a community that's still processing whatever it means to do whatever it is that they do because they believe Jesus is the Messiah. It's complicated. I picture Peter and James and John kind of rubbing their eyes as they look on that mountain, trying to figure out if what they're seeing is real. Maybe they're slapping themselves in the face, trying to keep themselves awake. Or maybe they're like me at Wednesday morning Bible study and muttering to themselves, need more coffee. And then Peter speaks out, and he doesn't even think first. He just blurts out, "Master, it's good for us to be here. Let's make 3 dwellings, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And for us, this seems like such a weird thing to say. But it wasn't so weird for Peter. I mean, they're used to festivals and celebrations. They celebrate the Jewish festival, the Feast of Booths, or the Feast of Tabernacles. You can read all about it in Leviticus. And in this feast, in this celebration, they build booths. And they give thanks to God for protecting the Jewish people during their wanderings in the wilderness. And Moses and Elijah have long been known by the Jewish people to represent the law and the prophets. And there they were on the top of that mountain with Jesus, the Messiah. And of course they would want to build booths for each of them, so they can stay there, so they can make this ground holy, so they don't have to leave, so they can protect that experience and pass it along to the next generation. let's protect our thing. Churches never say anything like that. Let's be careful who we invite to this next Bible study, or social gathering, or youth group, kid camp, meal. Because we don't want to disrupt the chemistry that we already have. That never happens in a church. We want to grow, but not too big. Because we don't want to change the ethos that our church already has. Said no evangelism committee ever. Yeah, right. And there it is, that word. That E word, yes, I said it, evangelism. The sound of it is enough to scare many a Presbyterian away. And herein lies the problem. We don't know how to talk about our experiences of the divine in our lives and in the world. We don't know how to do it. Peter blurts out, and then this voice comes from a cloud and says, "This is my son, my chosen, listen to him." And then they are all silent. They don't speak again. In fact, the author tells us they kept silent and in those days told no one any of the things that they had seen. So that's it. I mean, we either rush to speak, not knowing what we say, or we don't say anything at all. Isn't there something in between? Listen to him. That's what the voice from the cloud says. God tells us to listen to Jesus. And when we do, we find that the first thing Jesus said when we are listening is, "You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." Wow. I mean, all those goose pimples and fuzzy warm feelings that we had just a day ago on top of that mountain when we saw Jesus and Moses and Elijah together, that feeling that we had that we wanted to protect it and make it safe so we could remember it forever in this untainted way, is suddenly dashed against the base of that mountain. Convicted. We often twist God's words. "This is my son, my chosen, listen to him," becomes in our minds something more like "sit down and shut up." But that's not what was said. We often hear and speak of our religion and our faith experiences in very sloppy ways. Last week at the Association of Presbyterian Christian Educator Conference in Chicago, I heard author and UCC pastor Lillian Daniels speak on this very subject. She said, mainline Protestant Christians in America often speak of evangelism in one of two ways. We either talk about our religion and our faith a lot and tell people why they're going to burn in hell if they don't get it, or we don't talk about it at all for fear that we might offend someone or leave someone out. And we just take on this whatever floats your boat kind of approach. So Daniel believes between these two polar opposites, we have lost the ability to talk about our faith experiences at all. Jesus was transfigured up there on that mountain, surrounded by Moses and Elijah. He appeared different. Peter and James and John, they witnessed it. They heard it, they saw it, they experienced it. And because they did, they were changed too. Their lives were transfigured, if you will, because of that experience and because of what they came to believe, that Jesus is the Messiah, God's chosen one. How is your life transfigured? How are you changed because you believe in Jesus, the Christ? Are we keeping it to ourselves? Are we building walls around our faith and our experiences to keep them safe? Or are we sharing them? What happens to our faith when we come down off of that mountain and walk out of this sanctuary into the world that waits for us while we worship? Can people see that we are different, that we are changed because of the time that we spend in here? Can they tell that we are different? I believe that if we, as a people of faith, don't learn how to talk about and share our experiences of the divine in our lives and in our world, then we surely are a part of a dying religion. The most important questions we should be asking ourselves are, how is God experienced? And how do we talk about it? How do we show it? How do we share it? Because our transformation and the transformation of others is always rooted in experience. How have you experienced God in your lives? How have you experienced God in this place? If your answer is, it's complicated, well, then maybe we should encourage one another to think harder, to love more, to find different words, to let ourselves become even more uncomfortable until we can answer, it is complicated or not. In Kenya, I experienced God in the faces of almost every single person we met because they told us and they showed us with their words and with their actions, God is here, and I can't wait to show you how. This is what we should strive to do now. Anytime anyone walks through those doors, whether they're a member or a non-member, a visitor, a family that's only going to visit here once in their whole lives, we should be striving to say, God is here, and I can't wait to show you how. Regardless of whether they have children or they're going to join that Sunday school class or they're going to take that Presbyterian polity course or they're going to tithe or they're going to join our latest committee, God is here. And we can't wait to show you how we experience God in the loud singing of the doxology by a 4-year-old. We can't wait to show you how we experience God in the sheer number of people that show up on a regular basis to volunteer to teach logos and Sunday school or participate in a Christmas mission project or donate blood or walk for Habitat for Humanity because they care about this church, about each other, about this community. I can't wait to show you how we experience God in the Wednesday morning Bible study class that meets religiously, not only to study the scripture, but to pray for and with one another. I can't wait to show you how God is here in the way that the youth comb over the poems to pick the perfect one to write in a card that's going to a college student that needs a little extra support right now. I can't wait to show you how God is here in the totally unobtainable vision that the outreach committee has and how they are determined to get us there. I can't wait to show you how we will experience God in the wildflowers that are soon to pop up in the churchyard or in the laughter that we share in communion when the bread is so hard we can't break it with a hammer. I can't wait to show you how we experience God by seeking intentional companionship with those from other faiths and how that enriches our lives together. I am so lucky because I get to experience God here and this place almost every day of the week. And the love that you show toward each other and toward me, and the care that you give to this community and the world. It is an experience worth sharing. And it's really not that complicated. Amen.